I am gonna assault the heck out of you. Yeah, I think technically you've already assaulted me, and what you're doing now is battery. I gotta stop beating up law students. Do you know the difference between assault and battery? Guess what? There's multiple definitions. Let's find out what they are and get our tort on. I'm Brian. I make videos about law and civics, and we are going to learn about some torts, specifically assault and battery. But first, please comment, like, subscribe, do all the stuff, get this out there so people will see it. Because this is your law and you deserve to understand it.
All right, so we're going to talk today about the difference between assault and battery. And what's kind of unusual about assault and battery is that they exist in both tort and criminal. And we've talked a little bit about the differences between tort and criminal law. Criminal law is essentially the state or government coming after you for a penalty of some sort for the crime that you've committed. Whereas tort is where the person that you've injured comes after you to pay them money for the way that they were injured in order to repay them for whatever the injuries cost. Now, this pulls together several of the things we've talked about in the past because the costs that you give them are supposed to make them whole again. And in a second, you're going to meet our friend, the reasonable man. But it is important for you to understand that the definition of assault and battery in criminal law and the definition of assault and battery in tort law are different. And we're not going to go into the criminal law definition today because it's just another rabbit hole. But assault and battery are injuries that happen because someone intentionally did something to you and you were hurt. Assault and battery are what we call intentional torts. There's a lot of torts that are not intentional. So let's talk about the definitions. We're going to start with battery. In tort, battery requires two things. A battery is a harmful or offensive contact with another person's body. As far as the definition of offensive goes, usually it's defined just as unpermitted. So if you didn't tell them they could touch you and they touched you, it's offensive. So if anybody touches you without your permission, that is a battery. But keep in mind, we're only talking about this in tort. And that's really important because in criminal law, if you are found guilty of committing a crime, if you have done the two things that are required to have committed that crime, then you have to pay a certain penalty. And that penalty is usually laid out in some way. In tort, you have to make the person whole generally. Well, if someone touched you, were you made unwhole in any way? Possibly not. And that's part of what they're going to have to figure out. If nothing actually caused any damage, then there's nothing for you to actually be paid for. There's no compensation required. Okay, now we're going to talk about assault, which is a much more interesting one, I think, but it requires the definition of the word battery. For an assault to occur, the defendant must place the plaintiff in reasonable apprehension of an immediate battery. So there are some really exciting keywords in here and things that you should probably recognize at this point. So the defendant must put the plaintiff in reasonable apprehension. And if you watched my video the other day on the reasonable man, that's why I started there. Reasonable is an objective standard. We want to say that if we were to take the most average person in the world and put them in your situation, would they have been apprehensive in that situation? Would that average imaginary person have also been apprehensive in that situation? Yes or no? If yes, then it was reasonable. If no, then it was not reasonable apprehension. And then the second half of the definition of an immediate battery. And there's a whole bunch of case law on immediate. I'm not going to go into that one because that's a whole other video. But then battery just goes back to our other conversation. A harmful or unwanted touching without permission. Keep in mind that contact with the plaintiff's person does not include a part of that person that's not physically connected to them. So, for example, their purse that's on the other side of the room, definitely not a battery. A wooden leg that's been removed and is sitting somewhere not touching them is not part of their person. So once again, we have our battery and our assault. But both of these require some sort of damage usually in order for you to recover anything in court. So even though you might be able to prove that these things happened, it wouldn't really necessarily be worth your time and energy if there was no monetary damage that occurred, if somebody didn't hurt you enough to take you to the hospital or something like that, for them to pay a certain amount back to you. And that's one of the big differences between tort law and criminal law, is that in criminal law, if you're found to have committed whatever this is, there's a punishment no matter what. in tort law, we could find that you did this stuff, but if there's no damage, there's nothing to be done. Now, I know you've heard of things like emotional damages and things like that. I will tell you that they are rare. Not that they never happen, but they're far less common than you think. Most of the time in a tort, the damages that you get are the actual physical damages, the amount of money it costs you to go to the hospital, that sort of thing. Okay, so what we've done here is I've taken my tort video. I was trying to teach you the difference between tort and crime. We've taken my reasonable man video. I wanted you to understand who the reasonable man was, and now we've put him into context a little bit and seen what the reasonable standard is in context. And you've seen how a tort in action is different from a crime because of the penalty. And I want you to understand that there is this criminal system and this civil system that both do very different things, and they have different standards. A criminal law standard would generally be a lot higher because the penalties are a lot higher. So we're getting into this a little bit further. I hope you see that these things are kind of tying together, and I hope you're starting to understand how this whole system is sort of working a little bit. I'm going to be putting out some more videos over the next couple of days and trying to draw all of this stuff into a bigger web so it starts to make sense. Thank you very much for watching. Please share this and get this out there so people will watch it, and I really appreciate you guys supporting me. I really need to get a list of the people who've sent me a cup of coffee on buymeacoffee.com. I really, really appreciate it because I need to keep the lights on and all that stuff, so it really is very helpful. Thank you, and I'll get a list so I can thank you individually. But thanks a lot, guys.